Ladies and gentlemen, you ever notice how the loudest voices usually have the least figured out? Everyone's rushing to be heard, but the people really making moves, they're silent, focused. So here's the truth. Not everything needs a reaction. Not every battle is yours to fight. Today, we're diving into something we all forget in this noisy world. How focusing on we owe you and staying silent can be your greatest power. You know, a lot of people think if you're quiet, you've got nothing to say, or worse, that you're afraid. Weak, maybe even unsure of yourself. But let's get one thing clear, as our silence is not weakness as ours. Silence is strategy. See, the strongest person in the room doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. They don't need to dominate the conversation, throw words around, or show off. The strongest person knows exactly when to speak, and just as importantly, when not to. That kind of restraint. That's confidence. We live in a world that's constantly pushing us to react. Every scroll, every headline, every passive-aggressive comment from someone who barely knows us, it's all bait. It's designed to pull us in, make us respond, gets us off our center. But when you choose to stay quiet instead of lashing out, when you decide not to take the bait, that's strength most people don't even understand. And I get it. Sometimes silence feels unnatural, especially when someone's coming at you sideways. You want to defend yourself. You want to be heard. You want to set the record straight. But ask yourself this: what's the cost? Because every reaction takes something from you: energy, time, peace. And when you hand those things out freely to people who haven't earned it, you end up bankrupt where it matters most, on the inside. There's something powerful about being unbothered, not indifferent, not cold, just focused. When you're dialed in on your growth, your healing, your future, you don't have time to chase every insult or entertain every misunderstanding. You start to realize not every opinion needs correcting. Not every attack needs defending. Not every situation needs your voice. Some people try to provoke a response just to feel powerful. But when you give them silence instead of a reaction, you strip that power away. You hold your ground, and they're left swinging at the air. That's not just maturity, that's control. Think about it. Some of the biggest changes in your life didn't come from you announcing them to the world. They came from quiet decisions. The moment you chose to walk away, the day you finally said, "I'm done explaining myself," the time you started showing up for yourself instead of everyone else. No big speech, no drama, just a shift. And that shift, it happened in silence. When you're focused on yourself, you learn to stop seeking validation from the noise. Because here's the truth: not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not everyone gets a seat at your table. And once you know your worth, you stop discounting it with explanations. The loudest people in the room, more often than not, they're the most insecure. Because when you're truly confident, you don't need to broadcast. You don't need to announce every move, every win, every opinion. You just move, you work, you grow. You stay in your lane and let your progress do the talking. Silence protects your energy. It keeps you from fighting battles that don't serve you. It gives you time to process, to observe, to make smart decisions instead of emotional ones. That's power, real grounded, lasting power. So when someone tries to push your buttons, tries to draw you into a petty back and forth, remember, you don't owe them your peace. You don't owe them a reaction. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. You ever try to think clearly in a crowded room where everybody's talking at once? You can't focus. You can't even hear your own thoughts. That's what life feels like when you're constantly plugged into the noise, when your mind is tuned into everybody else's expectations, opinions, drama, and then we wonder why we feel scattered, why we feel like we're behind, why we're anxious and is exhausted. It's because we're listening to everything except what actually matters, our voices. Focusing on yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. It's survival, because you can't build a life that feels right to you if you're constantly reacting to the noise around you. The comments, the comparisons, the distractions, it's nonstop. And the truth is, most of it isn't even about you. It's just static. But if you don't learn to filter it out, it'll run your life. Every scroll through social media, every post, Every reel, it's somebody else telling you what your life should look like, where you should be by now, how much money you should have, what your body should look like, who you should date, what success should mean to you. You start living a version of life that isn't even yours. And that disconnect, it wears on you quietly daily until you wake up one morning and realize you're not even sure what you want anymore. You need space to hear yourself again, real space. And that only happens when you turn down the volume on everything else. You don't get clarity in chaos. You get clarity in silence, in solitude, in the moments where there's no performance, no pressure, just you checking in with yourself. That's where growth starts. Not in front of a crowd, but behind the scenes. Most people don't slow down long enough to ask, what do I actually want? Not what looks good to others, not what gets likes, not what makes your parents proud or your friends impressed, but what actually feels aligned with who you are. That kind of clarity requires intention. It requires stillness, and it requires honesty, a level of honesty that most people avoid because it's uncomfortable to admit when you've been chasing the wrong things. But you can't fix what you won't face. You can't focus on yourself if you're constantly distracted by what everyone else is doing. And the more you compare, the more confused you become because their path isn't yours. Their timing isn't yours. Their wins aren't your losses. But the noise convinces you otherwise. The real flex, it's not being seen. It's knowing who you are when nobody's looking, when it's quiet, when there's no applause. That's where your power lies. In that space, you get to rebuild. You get to reset. You get to redirect. And that kind of shift, it doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true. When you start focusing on yourself, people might not understand. You'll pull back. You'll start saying no more. You'll stop chasing validation. And that might confuse people who are used to having constant access to you. But that's okay. Let them wonder. Let them guess. That distance isn't rejection. It's protection. Because you're finally making room to grow. You don't owe the world an explanation for prioritizing your peace. You don't need to justify the boundaries you're setting. You're allowed to log off. You're allowed to not respond. You're allowed to choose silence over chaos. Because the more time you spend tuning into yourself, the less you feel the need to tune into everyone else. So if life feels noisy right now, if you're tired, overwhelmed, stuck, maybe it's not because you're lost. Maybe it's because you've just been listening to everything but yourself. Turn it down. Go inward. And let that be the moment everything starts to clear. There's this moment right between something happening and you reacting that most people skip right over. It's small, just a few seconds. But in that space, that's where your power lies. Because every time something hits you, an insult, an inconvenience, a frustration, you've got a choice. You can react or you can reflect. One burns energy, the other builds wisdom. Most of us were taught to react fast. Someone cuts you off, you lay on the horn. Someone disrespects you, you fire back. Someone questions you, you explain, defend, prove. It's automatic. But just because something feels automatic doesn't mean it's right. Reaction is instinctual. Reflection is intentional. And that gap between the two, that's where growth happens. Here's the thing. People who are constantly reacting are usually exhausted. Their emotions are always at the mercy of other people's actions. They're on edge, always responding to something, pulled in every direction. That's not peace. That's chaos in disguise. And at some point, you've got to ask yourself this. Is this worth my energy? Because every time you react, you're spending something, your attention, your time, your emotional bandwidth. And most of the time, the return on that investment is zero. When you reflect instead of react, you buy yourself time, time to process, time to ask what's really going on here, time to decide if it even deserves your attention. Not everything does. In fact, most things don't. But we live in a world that rewards reaction. Click faster. Respond now. Prove your point. Show up. Speak up. Clap back. But the people who are really grounded, they know the value of a pause. That pause, it protects you. It keeps you from saying things you'll regret. It keeps you from making decisions rooted in anger, fear, or ego. And it keeps you aligned with the person you're becoming. not the version of you that used to fight every battle just to feel seen. The reflecting doesn't mean you ignore what happened. It means you choose how to respond with clarity, not impulse. It means you understand that your energy is a resource and you don't waste it on situations that don't grow you. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Sometimes people say things just to provoke a reaction. They want you to get loud so they can say you're too much. They want you to get emotional so they can call you unstable. But when you stay calm, when you reflect instead of explode, you take away their control. You protect your narrative. You keep your dignity. This doesn't mean you never speak up. It just means you speak with intention, not emotion. You speak when it's necessary, not just because you're triggered. And trust me, when you do that, your words carry more weight because you're not just reacting. You're responding from a place of clarity. People who master the pause don't get walked on. They just don't waste time fighting battles that don't matter. They're focused, they're strategic, they know that every time they choose silence over drama, reflection over reaction, they're building something stronger within themselves. And that strength, it's quiet, but it shows up in everything. You ever notice how peace doesn't need to prove itself? It just is. And when you're rooted in peace, you don't let every situation pull you out of character. You don't trade your stability for someone else's dysfunction. You don't match their energy. You protect yours. React less. Reflect more, because you've got too much ahead of you to be losing sleep over things that don't even matter in the long run. Most of the noise is just that noise, temporary, fleeting. But your peace, your focus, that's long-term, and it's worth protecting every single time. There's something we don't talk about enough: how expensive peace really is. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the emotional costs, the mental costs, the energy it takes to protect it. Because once you finally get a taste of real peace, the kind that calms your nervous system, clears your mind, lets you sleep at night, you realize how much noise you were living with before, and more importantly, how much you were giving away just to keep other people comfortable. You don't fully understand the value of peace until you've lived without it, until you've been caught up in drama that wasn't yours, until you've spent hours replaying conversations, defending yourself, overthinking text messages, until you've tried to be everything to everyone and ended up losing yourself in the process. That's when it hits you. This isn't sustainable. This isn't healthy. This isn't freedom. And that's the shift. When you stop giving out pieces of yourself just to feel included or understood. When you finally say ours no more explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. No more engaging in arguments just to prove a point. No more shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. Because the truth is, your peace is too expensive to keep trading for approval, attention, or access. Some people won't like that shift. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're cold now. But the reality is, you're just no longer available for chaos. You've learned to protect your energy like it's sacred because it is. You've learned that boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're fences to keep your peace in. And if someone feels uncomfortable because you've drawn a line around your peace, that's on them, not you. A lot of people feel guilty for choosing themselves, especially if you're used to being the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who always shows up. But here's the thing. Constantly showing up for everyone else while abandoning yourself is not love. It's self-neglect, and eventually it catches up to you. You either burn out trying to keep everyone happy, or you slow down and start choosing peace on purpose. You're allowed to stop explaining. You're allowed to pull back. You're allowed to be unavailable sometimes. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not every text needs a response. Not every phone call needs to be answered. And the moment you realize that, life starts feeling lighter. Not because the problems go away, but because you're no longer carrying what isn't yours. There's power in being unavailable and not letting everything reach you and not internalizing every opinion or comment. It doesn't make you rude. That makes you wise because you understand that your mental space isn't a public park. It's a private garden. And only certain people get to walk in. It's not about isolating yourself. It's about aligning yourself with people who bring peace, not pressure, with conversations that feel nourishing, not draining, with decisions that honor your growth, not your guilt. That kind of alignment isn't always loud. It doesn't need an announcement. It just shows up in how you carry yourself. Calmer, more grounded, more sure of who you are and what you're no longer entertaining. Protecting your peace might look like staying quiet instead of clapping back, like canceling plans that drain you, like letting people be wrong about you, because proving them wrong costs too much. It's not that you don't care, it's that you care more about your peace than their perception. And honestly, that's the shift more people need because we spend too much time trying to be understood in rooms we don't even belong in. Let it go. Let them go. If it costs your peace, the price is too high every time. So when someone asks you why you're so quiet lately, why you've been pulling back, guarding your energy, being more intentional, you don't need a long explanation. Just let them know you've stopped trading your peace for things that never gave you peace to begin with. There's something powerful about moving in silence, about keeping your head down, staying focused, and letting your progress be the thing that speaks for you. In a world obsessed with attention, with oversharing, with proving something to everybody watching, there's something deeply underrated about choosing to just do the work without needing to broadcast it. We've gotten used to thinking that every goal, every win, every small step needs to be posted, announced, or explained. That if people don't see it, it doesn't count. But the truth is, most of the growth that matters happens away from the spotlight, behind closed doors. When nobody's clapping, nobody's checking in, just you showing up for yourself. And yeah, it's tempting to want recognition. It's tempting to want people to notice your effort, your hustle, your change. But here's the thing. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need applause to validate your progress. Progress is loud enough on its. When you're doing the work, when you're healing, improving, becoming more disciplined, more grounded, more self-aware, that kind of transformation doesn't always need a stage. It just needs consistency. What happens when you stop talking and start building is this. You gain momentum because all that energy you used to spend trying to be understood, it gets redirected into your goals, into your peace, into your growth. And that kind of quiet focus, it's magnetic. People start noticing that something's different about you. Even if you never say a word, they feel it. It's in how you carry yourself, how you move, how you no longer respond to things the way you used to. There's a quiet confidence that comes from being committed to something privately, from showing up for yourself even when nobody's watching. That's where the real shift happens. Not when you announce the plan, but when you become the plan. When you no longer feel the need to explain the steps because you're too busy climbing them. Some people will question your silence. They'll assume you've lost interest or fallen off. Let them think what they want. Your progress isn't for them, it's for you. You don't owe them updates. You don't need to prove you're evolving. Real growth doesn't need a narrator. It just shows up in results. And you know what else happens when you move in silence? You protect your progress. You keep it safe from opinions, from unnecessary pressure, from outside noise that can derail your focus. Because sometimes the moment you start sharing everything, you open the door to doubt, to comparison, to people projecting their fears onto your vision. And suddenly the goal doesn't feel as clear anymore. That clarity, that drive, it gets clouded. But when you keep it to yourself, when you build in silence, you give it room to breathe. It's not about hiding. It's about being intentional, about understanding that not everything needs to be public. That's sometimes the most sacred parts of your journey are the ones nobody knows about. That's where the power is. In the decisions you make at 5 or 8 a.m. that nobody sees. In the boundaries you keep without announcing them. In the nights you stay in to work on yourself instead of showing up just to be seen. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be visible to be valuable. Sometimes your silence is the most confident thing about you because it says, I know where I'm going. I don't need to prove it. I just need to keep moving. If let your actions talk, let your discipline talk, let your peace talk, you're not missing out by staying quiet. You're building something solid, something real, something lasting. Because in the end, progress speaks for itself every time. So here's what it all comes down to. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to explain your every move, defend every boundary, or react to every voice around you. You just need to stay grounded, stay focused, stay silent long enough to hear yourself again. Because when you focus on yourself, when you stop performing for the world and start showing up for you, everything changes. You move with intention. You stop chasing noise and peaceful for attention. And the best part, you start living life on your terms, not theirs. So let them talk. Let them wonder. Let your silence do what noise never could. Build the life you actually want.